Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready to explore another corner of pop culture?
Always.
Awesome. Well, today we're taking a deep dive into Avengers: Infinity War.
Oh, a classic.
It really is. And we've got a ton of material to dig into: production notes, behind-the-scenes stories, critical reviews, even some wild fan reactions.
Sounds like we're going full-on Thanos mode, collecting all the intel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we're not just going to rehash the plot. We want to understand what makes Infinity War such a phenomenon, how it changed the game for superhero movies.
Well, you definitely can't talk about Infinity War without talking about the impact of the entire MCU leading up to it. I mean, this movie was the culmination of, like, a decade of storytelling.
Right. It wasn't just a standalone flick. Marvel was building a whole universe, which was pretty groundbreaking at the time.
Yeah, it really changed the way studios approached franchises. But let's talk about the big bad himself, Thanos. We know he wants to collect the Infinity Stones and wipe out half of all life. But what makes this villain so compelling, it's not exactly a unique goal for a bad guy.
It's his motivation, isn't it? He's not doing it for power or greed. Thanos actually believes he's saving the universe.
Exactly. He thinks he's being merciful even, which is, well, totally twisted. But it's that warped sense of altruism that makes him so fascinating, so different from your typical villain.
It's not just good versus evil, it's about clashing ideologies, which makes the stakes way higher.
Totally. And the fact that he succeeds, actually snaps his fingers and half the universe disappears.
Yeah.
It blew everyone's
I
minds.
bet. That ending was a total game changer. Speaking of shaking things up, let's talk about the cast. I mean, Infinity War had an insane lineup of stars, but finding the right Thanos was crucial.
Absolutely. They ended up going with Josh Brolin, and to bring his performance to life, they used some incredible motion capture technology. They even developed a brand new facial capture application called Masquerade, just for Thanos.
Wow, a whole new technology just for one character. That's dedication.
It was. And it paid off big time. They were able to capture every nuance of Brolin's performance. You could see the weight of his so-called mission in his eyes, even when he was doing something truly monstrous.
That's what elevates a movie from good to unforgettable, right? When the technology serves the story. And speaking of unforgettable, the visuals in Infinity War were next level. It was the first Hollywood film shot entirely with IMAX digital cameras. Now, for anyone who's not a film geek, what difference does that actually make?
It's about immersion. The level of detail, the scale of the action sequences, it's breathtaking. Think about the battle in Wakanda, the IMAX cameras. Capture the vastness of the battlefield, the intricate details of the costumes and everything.
Yeah.
It felt like you were right there in the middle of it all.
So it's not just seeing it, it's experiencing it.
Exactly. And speaking of Wakanda, it felt like way more than just a cool location in Infinity War.
Right, especially coming off the success of Black Panther, Wakanda had become this symbol of representation, this powerhouse.
Yeah, its inclusion in Infinity War wasn't just about showcasing futuristic tech. It was about acknowledging its significance in the wider cultural conversation.
So Wakanda brought a real-world resonance to the movie.
Absolutely. It showed that Marvel was paying attention to what was happening in the world, weaving these important narratives into their universe.
Okay, so we've got ambition, groundbreaking visuals, cultural relevance, but let's talk about the characters. I mean, this is a massive ensemble cast. How did they manage to give everyone their moment to shine?
It's a balancing act, for sure. But the Russo brothers, the directors, they're masters at weaving those individual character arcs into the larger story, like Thor dealing with so much loss, Gamora struggling with her past, Tony Stark carrying the weight of, well, everything. Their personal journeys mirror the bigger conflict, which adds this really powerful emotional depth.
It's like everyone has their own battle to fight, both inside and out, which makes the whole universe feel more relatable.
Totally. It's not just about saving the universe. It's about how these characters deal with loss, with sacrifice, and with this huge responsibility they feel.
So Infinity War goes way beyond just explosions and superpowers. It's about characters we care about facing impossible choices.
Yeah.
And those choices have consequences, like that gut-wrenching ending.
Oh, for sure. We can't talk about Infinity War without dissecting that ending, because that's where it really flipped the script on what a superhero movie could be. It completely subverted our expectations, and that's something we'll unpack when we come back.
Welcome back, everyone. We left off on a bit of a cliffhanger, talking about that ending of Infinity War and how it totally changed the game for superhero movies.
Right. I mean, Thanos snaps his fingers and boom, half the universe is gone. Poof! No more happy ending where the good guys win and everyone's celebrating.
It was like something out of a horror movie, but in a superhero flick. Did anyone see it coming?
Not many. And that unpredictability is part of what made the movie such a massive hit. You know, Marvel had kind of trained us to expect that the heroes always find a way to win. But Infinity War showed us that no one is safe, even the mightiest heroes.
I remember being in the theater when Thanos snapped his fingers, and it was like everyone in the audience was holding their breath. It was silent. No one knew what to say, just total shock.
Yeah, I bet you could hear a pin drop in theaters around the world. But it wasn't just about shock value. There's a brilliance to it from a storytelling perspective. That ending wasn't just a cliffhanger. It raised the stakes for the entire MCU.
So you're saying it wasn't just a cheap trick to get us hyped for the sequel?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
It fundamentally changed the landscape of the MCU. Suddenly, the possibility of loss, of failure, was real. No one was safe. And that made the wait for Endgame so much more intense.
It's like they broke the mold with Infinity War and proved that superhero movies could be more than just lighthearted fun.
Exactly. They showed that these films can deal with heavier themes, explore those morally gray areas, and even leave us with a sense of sadness, real sadness, and audiences loved it.
And I think it's also because they had built up these characters so well over the years through all those other MCU movies. Seeing characters like Spider-Man and Black Panther fade away, it was heartbreaking.
Totally. It wasn't just about losing heroes. It was about losing characters we'd come to love and root for over the years. All their struggles, their victories, their relationships, it all came crashing down in that one moment.
Yeah, it was like watching a friend go through something horrible, and it made the MCU feel more real, more grounded, because there were actual consequences. Even the most powerful beings were vulnerable.
Exactly. And then when the heroes finally did win in Endgame, it felt so much more earned, because we knew what they had lost and what they had to overcome to get there.
Okay, but we can't forget about the pure spectacle of Infinity War. The battles were epic, the effects were mind-blowing, and the scope of the whole thing was unlike anything we'd seen before.
Absolutely. Remember, this was the first Hollywood movie to be shot entirely with IMAX digital cameras.
Right, right. But help me out here. Why was that such a big deal?
Well, think about that battle scene in Wakanda. The IMAX cameras captured the scale of it all, every single detail, down to the costumes and weapons. It was like being right there on the battlefield.
Ah, so it's not just about seeing the movie, it's about being immersed in it.
You got it. And Wakanda itself was just stunning visually. That mix of futuristic technology with their traditional African culture, it was breathtaking.
And it was awesome seeing Wakanda play such a key role in the fight against Thanos. It felt like the perfect culmination of everything they built in Black Panther.
Oh, for sure. It wasn't just about cool tech. It was about celebrating Wakanda as a symbol of Afrofuturism and showcasing its importance in the world of superhero movies.
Okay, so we have this huge cast of characters, each with their own unique stories and motivations, and they all come together for this epic battle. How did the directors pull it off? How did they juggle all those different elements and still tell a story that made sense and kept us on the edge of our seats?
The Russo brothers are incredibly talented filmmakers. They know how to balance those big action sequences with those quieter, more intimate moments. And they never lose sight of the emotional core of the story.
And they gave every character a chance to shine, even with all the chaos happening around them.
It's pretty remarkable when you think about it.
You know, it's interesting to think about how Infinity War influenced the other MCU movies that came after it.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that happened in Infinity War sent shockwaves through the entire franchise. The losses, Thanos' snap, it cast a huge shadow over everything that followed.
It's like the whole MCU went through a shared trauma, and all the movies that came after were dealing with the fallout in different ways.
Exactly. And it set the stage perfectly for Endgame, which became the climax of everything that had come before. But we can't forget that Infinity War wasn't just a setup for Endgame. It was its own powerful, complete story.
Yeah, it wasn't just a bridge to the next chapter. It stood on its own, even with that devastating ending.
And it really stuck with people. It changed how we see superhero movies.
It proved that these movies can be about more than just popcorn entertainment, that they can explore those big, tough questions and emotions.
Audiences were definitely craving that kind of storytelling. They wanted to see their heroes tested, see them make hard choices, and face real loss.
Speaking of audiences, we have to talk about the fans. The MCU has such a dedicated fan base, and Infinity War really sent them into overdrive. What about those fan theories?
Oh man, the internet exploded. Everyone was coming up with theories about how the heroes would come back, who would survive, what would happen next in Endgame. It was a wild time to be a Marvel fan.
I remember spending hours on Reddit, reading all the theories, watching those breakdown videos on YouTube. It was so fun to speculate with other fans, everyone trying to figure it all out.
It just shows how powerful the MCU is, how it creates this community where everyone's invested in the same story and
Yeah.
eager to see what happens next.
And that sense of community, that shared experience, is a big part of what makes the MCU so special.
Exactly. It brings people together from all over the world, regardless of their background.
And Infinity War was like this huge cultural moment that united everyone.
Yeah, it really captured the imagination of people everywhere.
So we've talked about the impact Infinity War had on the MCU, on the superhero genre, even on us as viewers, but there's still so much more to uncover. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive and explore the lasting legacy of Avengers: Infinity War. Stay tuned. And we're back for the final act of our Infinity War deep dive.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. We've covered so much ground, from the buildup of the MCU to Thanos' twisted motivations to that unforgettable ending.
We even touched on the cultural impact of Wakanda and those wild fan theories that exploded online.
Oh yeah, those are fun. But before we wrap things up, I want to focus on the legacy of Infinity War. This movie wasn't just a box office hit, it was a game changer that continues to influence the MCU and superhero films in general.
It definitely raised the bar for superhero storytelling. It proved that these movies can be more than just mindless action. They can be smart, complex, and emotionally powerful.
And I think it gave other filmmakers the courage to take more risks, to explore those darker themes, and really challenge what audiences expect from a superhero flick.
Right. We've seen a wave of superhero films since Infinity War that are willing to dig deeper into the characters' psyches, grapple with moral ambiguity, and show that actions have consequences.
So Infinity War basically ushered in a new era of superhero cinema.
I think so. It
Uh-huh.
showed that audiences were ready for something different, something that went beyond the traditional superhero formula.
One thing that always gets me about Infinity War is how it managed to balance the epic scope of the story with these deeply personal character journeys.
Oh, totally. Even with a cast of like a zillion characters, the filmmakers made sure each one had their moment. We saw how the events of the film impacted them personally, and that made the stakes feel even higher.
Yeah, we saw Thor struggling with the loss of his family and his people, Gamora wrestling with her relationship with Thanos, and Tony Stark just carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Exactly. And seeing those struggles, those internal battles, made the whole thing feel so much more relatable. It wasn't just about saving the universe. It was about these characters facing their own demons, making impossible choices, and trying to find hope in the midst of all the chaos.
And I think those themes really resonated with audiences on a personal level.
For sure. I think that's why Infinity War continues to be so popular. It speaks to our shared human experiences. Loss, grief, hope, resilience. Those things are universal.
Thinking back on Infinity War, what's one thing that you'll always remember about it?
I remember walking out of the theater completely speechless. And then I couldn't stop talking about it. I had these long, intense discussions with friends and family about everything, the characters, the ending, those big questions the film raised. It sparked a level of engagement I hadn't experienced with a movie in a long time.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. I felt the same way. It was like the movie had tapped into something deep down and we needed to talk about it, to process it together.
And that's what great storytelling does,
Yeah.
right? It connects us, makes us think, makes us feel. Infinity War did all of that and then some.
Absolutely. So as we close out this deep dive into Avengers: Infinity War, I want to leave you with this thought. This movie was more than just a superhero spectacle. It was a cultural moment, a celebration of imagination, and a reminder that even when things seem hopeless, hope can still win out in the end.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And who knows what the future holds for these characters. With the multiverse opening up in the MCU, we might see these stories and characters revisited in new and unexpected ways.
That's what makes the MCU so exciting. There's always something new to explore, another adventure waiting just around the corner.
And we'll be here to dive into it all.
That's right. Thanks for joining us on this epic journey through Infinity War.
It's been a blast.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.